today, we're going to do a quick overview of introductions from the Zuri Group team that are here to work with you today. Then we'll talk a little bit about the Expert Access Program overview, what it is, and how these solutions fit into that program. And then we'll hopefully leave plenty of time for questions and answers. We do appreciate your joining in. Zuri Group as a company, we have been around for almost 15 years now, and we pride ourselves in being a team that is relationship driven. We are platform agnostic. We believe in we call them small P partnerships rather than the big P partnerships, where we work with vendors, but we don't necessarily conform to the partnership standards that make us beholden to them. And what we believe that makes us is an advocate for you as the client to help build right-sized solutions that are quality and driven by your needs rather than vendor needs. And that's something we take a lot of pride in, and I think it means and shows a lot in what we do within this program in particular. Expert Access as a program began out of this kind of problem. We have worked with Blackbaud CRM clients for all of our 15 years, and we had a lot of folks coming to us with the same problem over and over again. And those problems were typically, this is identified. Now, how do we go about doing that? And for you as a customer, then it comes down to, well, is there budget or time to do this? Do I build this? Do I try to buy this somehow? Is there even a place to buy this? Well, then I could research and contract with a team of developers. But who out there knows Blackbaud CRM in such a way that we can ensure that it's built both technically accurate and process functionally specific for what we need as an enterprise shop utilizing a Blackbaud CRM instance. And then how do you build and test and deploy that? And all of this has to then fit into what's the timing of the organization and other priorities. And that's why folks would come to us to continually look at building these solutions. And we got to a point where we said, there really should be a better way where we can support the community, where we can bring together these products and be able to offer something that fits these four buckets of surrounding areas of Blackbaud CRM that we are continually creating new solutions for. And these are fundraiser productivity, database management, and then, as we'll focus on today, integrations with the Velocity data management engine. In database productivity, you can see the Expert Access program has 15 plus solutions. We have over 30 plus solutions in the program today. We started 2 years ago with about 10 or so solutions in the program. That's grown, obviously tripled. We started off with 2 or 3 clients utilizing the program a couple years ago. Today, we're over 40. And we're very, very happy to say that most of those 40 customers who are utilizing the program are really using one or more, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of these solutions. Typically, they'll go with one of the bigger solutions. Maybe they need Outlook for 365, or maybe they need the Blackbaud Data Warehouse Sync. But then they'll use 2 or 3 others, or the duplicate compare. And all of these provide different value to different folks. But then all of the other solutions just are items that provide that much more value, that maybe were things, hey, I never thought of doing that. There's a better way. And that's what the program really does. So we're appreciative and thankful of the trust of all the customers who've joined in on this program, and hope that today also shows you some of the new additional solutions that we have with Velocity and Gmail. Just as an upfront for those of you on the line, who we do have a lot of current customers on the line who are interested and excited to see Velocity, as well as some new customers on the line. But this is basically the breakdown of how the pricing works for the program. We do a lot of credits where we've worked with clients to build different solutions, and we do credits for those customers. But the program really is an all-inclusive annual subscription. We do not do any kind of per user or per server costs. So if you're using Outlook, for example, there's no individual user cost. If you're using single sign-on, there's no individual server costs. And Included in this is a personalized client engagement where we have non-billable 30 minutes or so each month. You can sign up and meet with our team and talk through how to implement and utilize these solutions. You have an online portal and phone support, and the ability to input into the roadmap and provide for potentially new products that the entire community of Blackbaud CRM customers out there might need. So these are all areas where we try to, when we're talking about partnership, these are the way we want to be able to partner and work with you on creating a program that is accessible, that's helpful, and supportive of all your needs. So I think what we'll do is run straight from here, and we'll get started into the Velocity Data Management Engine. Will be our first demo for today. And for that, I am going to turn the program over to Patrick Shepard, affectionately known as Shep around here. So if we say that, that's who we are referring to. And I know a number of you have worked with him in the past. So Shep, I need to make you change presenter to you. And Ken, did you want a couple mentions on what how we came about with this solution?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. This is Ken Swift here. I manage the CRM services and technical services practice at Zuri Group, and been in the Blackbaud CRM world for, this would be my 15th year. So I was started managing the technical services team at Blackbaud in 2006, just before Blackbaud CRM was released, and been at Zuri, was at Blackbaud for about 8.5 years prior to joining Zuri about 6.5 years ago. In terms of the Velocity tool, where it stems from is between Shep and myself and many other folks here at Zuri. We have upwards of a couple hundred years of Blackbaud CRM SDK experience under our belts. Easily a third of that is building out integrations for different solutions, some of which we did many years ago that we're not so proud of, and those are things that we learned a lot from. And many of those things are things that we were proud of and we wanted to carry forward. So as Shep and I and others started kind of brainstorming what we could do to make our clients' experiences working with data within Blackbaud CRM a little bit easier, we decided to kind of pull together all the best practices that we have amassed over the many years of building out different integrations. And Shep's going to show show you a lot of those things today, but you have to think of the Velocity Data Management Engine as just not kind of an ETL tool, but rather a way that you can manipulate data within your Blackbaud CRM environment. So those organizations that may have come to Blackbaud CRM from the Razor's Edge, and you used to love the global updater capabilities. This is what you'll see some of today is parts of that built into the Velocity data tool to allow you to not only import data, but manipulate data that already exists within Blackbaud CRM, then also use it as an outbound tool. So if you're integrating with a third-party solution, not just bringing data in from a lockbox, but you want to do an API level integration with a third party, you'll be able to use Velocity for that too. So Shep, take it away.
All right, can you hear me okay? Is the first question.
I hear you fine.
Good. Yeah, our technical difficulties continue that my headset won't connect. So I've tried to move myself a little closer to the laptop so I don't sound like I'm in a different room. Yeah, so Velocity. As Ken said, we kind of took a step back and thought about all the integrations we've written, and took another step back to just think very broadly, how could we build a tool that will help with general data tasks? You know, so not only integrations and scheduled unattended things, but also we know what a lot of you do involves you know, ad hoc work. Like I've found bad data, I want to fix this data, or I found better data somewhere else, I want to move that data into the system, or I want to delete data. You know, it's so there are a lot of different use cases, and I'll kind of do my best to walk through some ad hoc cases first, and then show you what a typical integration might look like with this tool. So first things first, a little description of what this what this does. So we've broken down these data management tasks into basically for any data task, you're going to have three parts to it. You're going to read data, and then you're most likely going to need to transform that data a little bit, and then you're going to write data. So in the tool that most people are familiar with is the import tool in administration, right? And so you're reading data from a file there, and the import tool itself actually does some transformation. Obviously, it's converting lookup IDs to GUIDs, it's converting code table entries to GUIDs. You know, it's formatting the data in a way that CRM wants the data formatted, or that I should say CRM batch wants the data formatted. So if you break that process into those three parts, you know, you've got your read, which is your file, your transformation, which actually happens in the import engine, which is basically appending and looking up all those GUIDs. Then you got the writing, which is the actual creation of the batch. And so we have basically built a transformation layer, which is where a lot of the typical complexity lives with any integration that you write. But then we've got the concept of readers and writers that you attach to a process. So you've got those three pieces. You've got your and the terminology we use in here is sources and targets. So in the velocity process page here, we've got a number of different sources and targets laid out here. And the cool thing about these is they're, you know, this is not a Zuri group can only write these kind of thing. We're building this as a framework that other, you know, the client developers can build their own tools and come and register them here. So all of these just follow kind of the same general, they inherit a base class, and then you come and register them with the system, and then you can use it as either a source or a target. And so just a quick look at what we've got here in my system. I've got Illuminate Online source, so that'll read data from Illuminate Online in a very flexible manner. Ad hoc query, flat file is probably the most common and obvious source. Staging, so we have a staging mechanism that's built into this tool that I'll show you in just a second, but I think it's where a lot of the power lies with what we've built here. So staging can actually be a source or a target, right? So typical example of staging is anybody who's used the Illuminate Online sync knows that that sync pulls a bunch of revenue data into a staging, and one single staging table that holds multiple kinds of revenues, multiple kinds of revenue. And then you build queries against that staging table and push those into batch, and it's a really flexible tool. And so that same concept can be used here, where staging as a target is when you're writing to it, and then staging as a source, or I did that in reverse, but staging as a source, you query it and then move the data along to the next step. Another really powerful source and target that we have here are data forms. So first example I'm going to show you actually shows that you can take any data form in CRM and push data to it. And we've also created a data form source so you can explore what the data looks like coming out of that form if you have a more complex one that you want to see what does the data actually look like in an add a payment form behind the scenes. So you can export that and see what it looks like. Batch template, typical target there, and file as a target also. So you can use this for data in or out, or actually neither. So you could, if you really wanted to, you could hook up the Illuminate Online source to the flat file target and just dump data from a third-party API to a file, if that's what you wanted to do. And I've actually found many cases where I did want to do that, to pull some data from an API and just explore it in Excel. So that's just an example, and it's kind of like the sky's the limit with this stuff. Like, since these components are actually relatively easy to build, you know, as you think of ones and suggest them to us or suggest them to your developers, this thing will grow, and hopefully the functionality will, you know, expand exponentially. So we've got, I'll skip the formula variables thing because it's not going to quite make sense yet. There's a credential cache here for keeping logins to different systems, so different sources can, so you can set your credentials all in one place, basically. So if you've got a third-party API you're talking to, you can hit the credentials tab and store them there. And then if, for example, you restore to staging, you know there's only one place you would have to go to change your credentials. So staging table tab, I'll show you this real quick. So this is stuff that you could only do through the SDK before. You'd have to build a table with a table spec, and then you build a stored procedure to fill your table. You build a query to look at your table. You build batch links to link your table to the, you know, to different types of batches. And now we can do all this from the front end. And what this gives you is the ability to, let's say we build you an integration and you want to add a few more columns, or you want to change, you've got columns that you originally asked for that you don't need anymore. You can come in and you know, retire those columns or add new fields, and you don't have to talk to a developer for this stuff. And and even for developers, it makes this so much faster to go through the process of building, testing, revising, testing again. But so basically, this, when you save this, it'll build you a query. It'll build you a store procedure to fill the table. Obviously, it builds the table. If you've chosen batches, it'll link the staging records to batches. So what that gives you, it may not really be intuitive, is when you've got stage data, you have to have, your system has to be able to know if that data has moved to the next step. So if you staged 10 gifts, you only want 10 gifts to come into your system. You don't want 10 gifts to come into your system every time you run the process. So there's a mechanism here where this will track the batched record, and it'll also track it if it gets committed. And if the batch gets deleted, it will come back the next time. But if the batch gets committed and then deleted, it stays marked as processed. So there's that mechanism, which can be kind of a pain to write from scratch, is all built into this too. We've got the concept. It's a very similar concept to what we have in staging tables, but you can import a table here. So you can go grab a CSV file and import the table, and it creates a full-fledged a table and a query and everything. So I've got this naming opportunities thing for an example a little bit later, but I'll go ahead and just import this here real quick so you can see what this does. And this is something more for ad hoc work. And another cool thing here, you can link any of the columns in your imported table to a record type. You can do that with staging as well. So what this will do is build the query links. So if you say, hey, this is a constituent ID here, oops, looks like I doubled up my columns there. But what you can do is come in here and say, hey, this is a constituent. I just love the autocomplete in CRM drop-down boxes. I'm sure nobody else has experienced that before. But so you tell it what record type it is. It'll build a link. It knows that the query view associated with constituent is called constituents. And when you create this table behind the scenes, it will cross-link your imported table with the constituent view and vice versa. So I'll cancel out of this. All right, moving on. So got kind of a cool little demo here that's kind of starts with some ad hoc work. And so we had a client not too long ago ask us, hey, we need to import some naming opportunities. Is this, we want to build a batch for this. And I think this was when we were actually working on Velocity. And we said, well, actually, you can do that out of the box. So no customization needed here. So I'm going to call this naming opportunity import. And so this is, we'll walk you through an example of actually what it looks like to create one of these processes. So I've got a flat file. So I'm going to choose flat file as my source. Once I pick my source, it goes and it knows what data form to use for that source. And so this is like a really pared down version of it's kind of like the import form. And so I can choose here one time or recurring, because you'll see the concept throughout these demos that this stuff works for one time or scheduled processes. So if I chose recurring here, I can stick a wildcard in the file name, and what it'll do is sweep the import location for anything matching that file pattern. And it'll go through and run the process for each file that it finds. And if you want it to, it'll move it to a subfolder like an archive folder, which is kind of a nice way to keep a history of your files without having to overwrite the same named file every day, which I've never been super comfortable with. But for this purposes of this, we're just going to pick my naming opportunities file in here. And apologize if I'm a little slow on this. I've moved from a enormous monitor to this tiny laptop monitor because I'm trying to make it sound better by being close to my laptop here. Okay, so naming opportunities, one time, hit save, and then for my target, I'm gonna push these into a data form. So I'm gonna pick an add data form, and what you've got here is a search of all the forms in the system. So naming opportunity add form. And if this form had collections on it, I would get a chance here to say how many members of each collection I wanted to use. It's unfortunately one of the drawbacks of working with flat files is we still have kind of the concept of it all fits on one row. So similarly to like if I want to do two addresses in the constituent batch, I need to have addresses 1, address block, addresses 1, state, city, state, zip, and then addresses 2, address block, city, state, zip. So that's what the collection counts there is. So save this. I'm going to go. Now I'm in the main Velocity page. I'm going to hit edit data map. So that is going to let me pick and choose the basically any manipulation or translations that are going to happen between these two, between the source and the target. And so it's smart enough to know I've got these columns that are the same name, so it's figured that out. Like one thing, fundraising purpose didn't map because it's slightly different, but you notice here it's already pulled the metadata out of that data form, so it knows that type is a code table lookup. It knows that fundraising purpose is a search list. And I don't have to map all the rest of these because they're not required fields. So if I save this, let me go over here and do a quick ad hoc query so you can see that this isn't just smoke and mirrors. Naming opportunity. Okay, so name. We want to do description there and record. So I don't think I don't have anything in here. So I'll start the process. And meeting stuff is over the refresh. And so now I've imported these. So these are kind of goofy naming opportunities, but this is just straight out of my file. And so I'll show you another cool thing. So I just added a bunch of very simple data. You know, this doesn't have parent records that had to tie it to or anything, but you can do all that. You know, you can tie attributes to constituents, or you can tie things to parent level records. I'm going to export this here. So I've got this little export file, and let's say I wasn't really happy with my descriptions. And so I've got the ID, I've got that doubled up. I'll just go ahead and delete this. But I can edit this description. And let's see if I can get that number to increment. Should, right? Yeah, so I'm going to edit the descriptions. I've got the IDs associated with those. So this is stuck in my downloads folder. So I'll go back and I'll go ahead and create a different process for this. So let's call it renaming opportunities, or naming opportunities 2. So this is going to look similar. I've got a flat file. I'm gonna go pick it this time because it's sitting in my downloads, and I'm thinking it's 14. Yeah, 14. Oh, I need to close this. I did this earlier and it barked at me because the file was in use. Okay, so got that file that I just exported and modified the data. That's my source. And my target, it's going to be data form again, but this time it's going to be edit. And I know I need to change the caption here when I choose edit, but it knows it's an edit form. So naming opportunity edit form. So very similar to the last one, except this time we're going to pass it an ID and let it open those records. And so for this one, I need to tell it, hey, this is the ID of the record that I want to edit. And I'm re-importing just the name and description. And what this will do is, if you don't give it, like I can delete the name column here if I wanted to, and it'll only update the fields that you pass in. So if you've got 100 fields in your edit data form and you want to edit 2 of them, you can make it look similar to this. It will just ignore values that weren't passed in. It's not going to blank them out. Let's make sure I did everything right here. ID, so that's name, direct. Yeah, so that's good. And I should definitely show. It's hard to fit all this stuff into the amount of time we have, but one of the cool things, I'll go on a little tangent here, on search lists. So you've got this advanced editor that lets you go in and get to all the details behind a search list. And for example, we just solved a problem with a client earlier this week where they wanted to import interactions, but they had alternate lookup IDs on them. And the batch by default won't take alternate lookup IDs. It wants the full, the main constituent lookup ID. And that setting is buried deep in the batch metadata. It doesn't pass in that check alternate lookup IDs flag. But what you can do, if this were the constituent search list here, you would be able to come in here and pick the check alternate lookup ID's value, or that parameter, and set it to true. And you can say include deceased, true or false, or include inactive. So it gives you the ability to go way deeper in configuration, and that avoids having to customize for little silly things like the batch not wanting to check alternate lookup IDs to pull up the constituent, or by default not allowing gifts to come in on deceased folks, who sometimes that's a requirement. So anyways, sorry for the tangent, but so what we've got here, we've mapped.
Real quick, Shep, since you just finished the tangent, we do have a question. Okay. Maybe this is a good time off the tangent, but it says, could this be used for survey data, which doesn't have an out-of-the-box import process in CRM?
Yeah, if surveys have data forms, then yes. So I'm not familiar with those data forms, but this is meant to take advantage of the thousands of data forms that exist in the system. And I don't have this to demo yet, but the next step, and it's a really easy step, is to hook this up to record operations. So well, I know it may make some of you cringe, but you might. So if you wanted to bulk delete things that don't have a bulk delete global change or any function that'll work like that, you can do the same general set of steps here. Maybe write an ad hoc query to identify the records you want to delete, get those IDs into a CSV, map those to a record operation that is delete for that particular record type, and then you can, you don't have to either have somebody do it in the backend database or build a customization to do that as well. So again, there's thousands of record operations in the system that this will open up the ability to map to.
And I know that was a tangent, but I have to tell you that there was a comment where someone said the tangent answered the question they had. So your tangent was actually really was perfect.
Nice. Yeah, I guess as long as we don't too far over time, we're good.
There you go. I'll let you move on now. Thanks.
Okay, so assuming I pick the right files and everything, when I run this, it should edit all of those naming opportunities. So I come over here. Yeah, so now my descriptions have changed to you can really do this. So hopefully it's a really simple example, but it works as the complexity builds too. Like we've got a client that wants to test this with the add plans and steps form, or I think it's add plan with steps form. So he can bulk add both plans and steps, and the steps is a child collection, if I remember correctly, and it's all set up to handle that. So you probably won't be able to do those in 2 or 3 minutes like I did this, but it should support it. Okay, so it's a good example of what ad hoc work might look like. So now I'll take you through more of what an integration would look like. So we, for Baylor last year, we had a campus call import, and they had, it's kind of a legacy formatted file where they were echoing back some bio updates, some call results, and gift information all in the same file, which in 10 years ago, that would have given me a really bad headache. But now, with the tools that we've built along the way, that's actually relatively easy to solve. So the way we solved that for them and with this, we didn't use Velocity for them, but we kind of built this out for them in a more of a one-off kind of way. You build a staging table. So we've got this campus call demo staging table, and and you come in, you pick your data types. So these are all the fields that come in from the file. Let's see, it actually doesn't have a constituent ID in it. I'll pull up the file. That would be helpful, wouldn't it? For demo CC1. Okay. Right. So you've got an ID, which I made this an alternate lookup ID so I can show you the that example here in more detail. You got a call date, bunch of bio info, and this is just junk data out of my my like Robert Hernandez database. And then over here, you've got a do not call flag, which is sparsely populated with Ys. So these people were like, I don't want to be called by your campus call campaign. And then some payment data, basically. So I put in like an arbitrary code, meaning payment here, because that's actually similar to what we had in the sample. And then amount, designation, payment method, card type. So it's keeping it relatively simple for expediency, but hopefully you get the picture. And so we built a staging table that very closely mirrors what was coming in through the file. The only thing we did different was this is a constituent ID, and there was an alternate lookup ID in the file. And so I'll go back and start showing you the different processes and how this is going to work. So high level, first step is we're just going to bring the file in and stage it, right? And then the next step, we're going to create a bio batch for any new records that came in that have bio updates in them. And then the next step, we're going to handle those Ys for opt-out. And then the next step is the gift. So each row could spawn 3 different records in CRM. So let's take a look at how this is set up first. So flat file settings, you've seen that screen. I'll go into staging. So as a target, so remember this is writing to staging. You just get the staging table. So it knows that there's a stored proc associated with that table, and it's going to use that as the target and where it pulls its fields from. So let's look at this data map. Come on, work with me. Okay, so this is the cool part. So I've got no source field here, but the target field is constituent, and I've configured this as a lookup, and we are using the constituent search by lookup ID. And for the lookup ID field, which is the quick find, and it pulls all this metadata when you pick a search list, I'm going to put the source for that as my ID column. And then, and remember, this is the ID out of the file, right? So it's transforming the file data into what goes into staging. And so we're taking that alternate lookup ID and we're going to transform that into a constituent ID. And so here we picked check alternate lookup IDs, true. And again, just like I was mentioning before, if we want to allow deceased, we can do that, include deceased, constant, true. And these drop downs, meaning, so you can either pick a field value, which means the value exists in the data, or you can just say, this is a static value, I'm going to type it in. And when you do that, the constant value opens up. Can't believe I've gone this far without talking about formulas. I'm going to put a pin in that.
But we did have a question asking about the formula field here.
Yeah, I've got a really,
yes. And
I've got a really good example of that.
I definitely need to yeah, on the formulas. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to try and be more linear in this presentation, and that's apparently going up in flames. But all right,
It's all
so
good.
yeah, so we got one lookup. The rest of them are direct, right? So that just means the direct map means what's in the file goes into the table. So I'll run this. 48 records in the file. 48 records are going to the table. Nothing too magical there. Let's go look at the bio batch here. Oh, we got formulas in here. That's great. I was going to go to the LO sync piece to look at some formulas, but we've got some examples in here. So one of the challenges with importing file data from a third-party system into a batch is that, especially in the bio batch, it's got a lot of weird requirements, especially around biographical information. So if you've ever had to transform one of these files that's got a couple of addresses, a couple of phones, you know that you've got to pass a phone type or an address type, but only if a phone and an address exist on that record. Because if you just hard code home into the whole column, but then you don't have a phone to go along with that, the batch is going to say home phone's required, or phone number is required, because it's going to go and create a phone number entry with a blank phone number because you passed something into that field. And so what we've got here, if I go to the advanced properties, what we're saying here is if the address line 1 is blank, then give it basically a null GUID. Otherwise, we're making a call to this translate code table function and saying, go look at the address type code table and give me the GUID for the home value. And so what you can do here is test this. And you'll see this came up as null because I didn't put in anything for the address line 1. But if I put 200 Grandview in there and I test it again, it pulls in the GUID. And so this is the stuff that gets buried in all of your integration code. And it's, again, if there's a problem with it or something needs to change, then you're either digging through the code we wrote for you or calling a developer. But here, this stuff is all right out in front. And we've got a hyperlink here to our Confluence page, and we're going to put a lot of examples in there for different scenarios. And another helpful thing, I'm going to screw this up on purpose and make it to where it doesn't compile. And once you get past the error CS 1026, you can see you've got parenthesis expected. So it's going to tell you that you messed it up, at least before it lets you save. I'm going to say to hit Control Z and put that back in, test it again, and go on with my day. So other examples, I think I probably got do I have any primary examples in here? No. And another example where you might use this is on the is primary. If you've got a new constituent, you can check and see if, hey, is my constituent ID null? Okay, any address that comes in needs to be marked as primary because the batch is going to require that. So you can do that stuff here, and I am quickly running out of time.
And I want to let everyone know that's writing in questions that if we don't answer your questions in the meeting, we will definitely be getting back to everyone with what those questions were and getting the answers back.
Yeah. So I'm going to fire this off. This is going to create a bio batch. Nothing super interesting about that. It's just reading the stuff out of the staging table. It's marking it as processed, and show you again. If I start this again, it's going to pull 0 because it marked all of those records as already in the bio batch. So again, we got integrations in mind with this stuff. So my next step here is I'm going to go from staging, so same staging source, but I'm going to go to a data form, and I'm going to do this constituent solicit code add form here. And because I want to, for anybody with a Y in them, I want to add the solicit code of do not phone. There's a formula in here for that. And I'll show you how I did this in staging. So when you use staging as a source, you get a query, right? So I've identified everybody that has a Y in their do not call who does not already exist in a dynamic selection of do not phone people, and also whose record has not been processed yet. Because if we don't do this, somebody comes along later and marks them as removes the do not phone, it's going to boomerang back in and try and mark them again. And so I've got my dog moaning in the background. Hopefully that's not distracting. Mark Adamson here, his communications tab. Oh, I already ran this. I was supposed to delete that first. Delete solicit code. So refresh. So he doesn't have a solicit code. We're going to run this. 3 records processed, and now he's got a solicit code. So it's very similar to the naming opportunities thing, except I'm using the query as the source. So again, if you start to think about how you can team any source with any target together, hopefully you see the power of this thing. And so I think I'm going to skip the staging to enhance revenue batch because it's just another example of the same. We're running through with a query, finding the ones that gave gifts and mapping those into the ERB. I want to talk real quick about performance and show you an example of the another thing that's cool that you can do with formulas. This is the LO Sync email campaign recipient process. This is a process that a lot of people have found somewhat useless because it pulls in millions of records, but it only does them at about 10 per second. So this is the out-of-the-box Blackbaud LO Sync version, running 50,000 records per 85 minutes. That's about 10 per second. Our velocity replacement for that process gets 1 million in 30 minutes, so about 537 per second. So it's night and day difference. It's basically made that data usable to clients instead of it just being kind of a bummer that they can't get it into their system.
And Shep, we are running into the end of time. I do want to get a couple minutes in for the and make sure to show. I know some people were interested definitely in the Gmail part to this, but I think I'll let you finish off here on the formula part, and then we'll answer a couple questions and then move and then finish.
Okay. Again, sorry for going long.
Oh, you're great. You're great.
So this is a funny one because the APIs store the receipt open time or recipient open time in milliseconds after 1/1/1970, which apparently is a standard thing for Unix, but I wasn't a Unix guy, so it's kind of insane to me, but that's how it's stored. So it's a really big number. And just another example of how we can transform data and make it more palatable to CRM just in this transformation layer here. We've got a formula that takes that, parses it out, and turns it into a date. So basically we're just adding 1/1/1970 adding milliseconds of an absolutely enormous number. But first we're checking to make sure it's not blank. And again, we can test this formula here, and it saves your test values. So you notice this was in here when I first hit this. So yeah, that's the example. A lot of future enhancements coming on formulas. We'll have history, and I think we're going to have versions of data maps and stuff like that. So I'll turn it over to the Gmail thing.
Well, Shep, I know I speak on behalf of all the Zuri Group folks of the work that you and the team have done on building this solution out. We we know as we've shown it to early adopters, it's been the reception has been wonderful, and we're really excited about what can be done, especially with the formula and the intelligence added into it changes the game for custom batches and integrations. So very excited, and there are a number of questions. So I see a lot of the questions. So if we will get all of those back to everyone, and so thank you for those. And so we will definitely not forget that. So thank you.